perhaps he's going to be able to put together his best run on clay. I was very impressed with him in Rome. I feel as though these conditions perhaps are a little more suited to him as well here. A little quicker. He can keep his opponents off balance a little bit more with certainly with his big forehand. So yeah, I mean, I'm kind of excited about his chance. I think also in the back of both the sort of top two Americans, although Andy Roddick obviously not here because of injury, is the fact that if they can perform well on this surface, it just sort of adds a little spice to their semi-final with Spain coming up. So I think if he could put together a bit of a run, given the fact that Spain already are sort of at loggerheads over the fact that they've chosen Madrid as the venue for that semi-final, a little bit of altitude, a little bit quicker, I feel as though I think this is the year that the Americans in particular have just a little added incentive to do well on the red clay.
Yes, it's an extraordinary development in Spain regarding the Davis Cup, and I'm sure we'll revisit that, Mark, as this match goes on. But you do wonder the severity of the arguments that are currently going between team members and Spanish tennis officials as to whether the top players are going to be there at all, which would be a huge shame, considering it is a semi-final. I'm sure there'll be some resolution somewhere, but when you hear some of the stories that are emanating from the camp, it, as I say, it would be no surprise if the top players give it a miss.
Well, I think, having spoken to a few of the Spanish players this week, that the reality is that they will be there, but they are not happy with the whole situation, and purely because I think the whole thing has been handled in a way that has just disappointed the players. Because bottom line is, when the sort of draw came out and they were playing the semis at home, they were told that they would be allowed to have pick of venue, and that whatever they wanted, they would be given for that tie. And I think you know, Madrid obviously have put a lot of money in, millions of euros into the Davis Cup, and clearly have put some extra money into Spanish tennis by the fact that they've won the semi-finals. And I think that the federation felt as though this was a great opportunity for them to swell their coffers. Clearly they don't have a Wimbledon or something like that. And ultimately he went back on his word, and I think that's the biggest problem for the Spanish players, and apparently it's not the first time that's happened as well. So, but as I say, having spoken to a number of them, I think that the reality is they will all turn up for that tie. Although they won't be happy, they will be there.
Well, here's a man who is going to be very much at the forefront of the American team in the semi-final. James Blake, 28 years of age, 8 in the world. He seems to have been around for an awful long time now, but a relatively late developer. Really, it was only until his mid-20s until he really started fulfilling the enormous promise that the Americans had known about for several years. Started having a little bit of an impact at the major tournaments, and I think just started playing with an awful lot more freedom as well. He had some devastations in his personal life, and I think that allowed him to take a step back, get a new sense of perspective on things, and maybe without the enormous pressure that maybe he felt in some of his earlier matches, he's been able to swing with that backhand. As you can see, there is such a fluid motion, isn't it? And when he can hit through that without a care in the world, it's one of the most devastating strokes in men's tennis.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think it gave him a sense of perspective. And if you talk to some of the guys on the tour before James Blake really became James Blake, for all of them, there was no way they were sort of saying, well, he's a guaranteed top 10 player. And I think it's a real sort of tribute to him. And the fact is that he's managed to get up there, but not just get up there, but also stay there in the world's top 10 as well. I mean, he was always a competitive sort of junior, and we've all heard the stories about him and his brothers and everything else. But the reality is to sort of turn yourself from a sort of the top 30, top 20 player into a regular member of the top 10 says an enormous amount about James Blake.
Well, here is Ernests Gulbis. He's actually 19 years of age. This time last year, made his Grand Slam debut against Tim Henman, and what a match that was. And I have to say, my feeling at the end of the straight sets thrashing that Gulbis dished out that day was that was probably the match. And of course, Tim will be the only person who truly knows this, but that was probably the match, which I think emphasised that Henman's career was coming to an end, because he was simply outclassed by a guy more than 10 years his junior. And if the likes of Gulbis are the future, then I think that made Henman realise that he was very much the past. And, you know, fine achievements, what a career it was. But this man from Latvia has a lot of promise. Although, having said that, Mark, he hasn't really built on that breakthrough victory as much as I think he would have liked. Plenty of time, of course, had a decent run at the US Open last year, but this year has struggled to string sequences of victories together.
Well, I agree. I think that, you know, he will be disappointed, I think, with his results. I mean, he's had some sort of highs. Tipsarevic in Barcelona, Carlos Moya in sort of Barcelona, Tipsarevic having to pull out of that match. And, you know, as you say, there's been the occasional good win, but there really hasn't been anything to write home. I had a very tight loss to Nikolai Davydenko in Miami as well.
Had a match point.
Exactly. So, you know, they're the sort of matches as well, Jonathan, that can sort of really change your year. And we can sort of look back and say, well, it's been average. And it has been average, there's no question. His quarterfinals of Vegas is really his highlight this year. But the reality is he come through that match against Davydenko, the confidence that he gains from that encounter, and then suddenly he goes on and perhaps makes a quarterfinal there or even a semi-final, and suddenly his year becomes sort of exceptional. And I think, as you say, you know, time on his side, I think that year will come for him. But obviously, in between, you've just got to sort of rely on the fact that he's not going to get too disheartened by, you know, his own progress.
Well, he seems a very affable, positive character. When you talk to him off the court, he knows he's got a long career ahead of him. 6'3", he's got a really dangerous forehand. He can really strike through it, and he skips into any mid-court balls. A very dangerous territory for his opponents because they're going to be lapped up with a voracious appetite. And we'll look out for the forehand of Gulbis today. Tricky conditions, not as blustery as it was at this time yesterday. The wind yesterday really kicking up the red dirt into the faces of the players. But still it's going to swirl around this bowl of a court one. Not dissimilar in looks to Andy Murray at the moment. Gulbis with his curly hair. Murray in excellent form yesterday, putting away Jose Acasuso with the minimum of fuss. A lot of people here already looking forward to his next match with Nicolas Almagro as being one of the highlights of the third round of the men's singles, and of course we'll bring that to you. Should be on the order of play for tomorrow, Friday, but we are wary of today's weather forecast, and of course if a large chunk of the day is wiped out today, then that will radically affect tomorrow's scheduled order of play, because a whole series of matches will go on the list for tomorrow, and maybe Murray will be pushed to Saturday, but we'll wait and see and let you know as soon as we have any information on when the boy might play again. It's certainly an interesting time in men's tennis, a whole collection of 19, 20, 21-year-olds who we feel could collaborate for a really tremendous top 10 in future years. And this man is right in amongst it, you feel, knowing about his natural talent.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to ask you, actually, because I felt yesterday's match that Andy played was possibly the best match that I've ever seen him play in terms of, you know, the consistency over 3 sets and putting away a very dangerous opponent. Had he sat back, I think would have become a very difficult encounter for him. Where do you rate that performance that he had?
Well, I actually asked him after his first round match, where would a victory against Jose Acasuso on clay, a good victory, where would that rank in terms of your professional victories? And he almost dismissed the question as if to say, well, you know, it would be okay, but he's not a world-class player, and you can't really compare it with the likes of beating Andy Roddick at Wimbledon. But in my mind, it was comparable, because Acasuso, sturdy, durable, a guy who knows his way around a clay court like his back garden. And I thought the victory for Murray, not just having the W next to his name, but also the manner of the victory, as you say, the aggression, the controlled aggression, the clarity of thought, the sense of purpose about everything he did, is something that's been missing from his game this year, and it was good to see. And where would I put it on his list of career victories? Right up there, one of his best.
Yeah, I mean, that's the sense that I had yesterday, having sort of watched the match and commentated on the match and coming away from it, and even having a night to sleep on it. You feel as though it really was, in terms of you know, the level of performance, the sustained level of performance throughout that match against somebody who I felt, had he just dropped a little bit, would have been right in there, Acasuso, and grabbed the set.
Good night's sleep.
Very good.
Premier manche, au service Ernests Gulbis. Jouer. Hands 0.
Blake taking that second serve very, very early, as he does have a tendency to do. Awkward, of course, with a single-handed backhand to deal with the high kickers. Shoulder height, if not higher.
Front cans.
Well, that ultimately is Blake's game, isn't it? Is to be on the front foot, to be offensive, and you know, he's talked about that a lot in press conferences. He says, you know, you guys in the press expect me to be sort of this great defender. He said, but that isn't playing to my strengths. So my strengths are sort of taking my game to my opponent, playing very quickly, upping the tempo.
What? Front out. Front Carons.
Well, that was an interesting change on the return from Blake there. Again, the aggressive position to return the second serve, but on that occasion deciding to slice it rather than try to come over the top, and he turned what would normally be a defensive return into an attacking one. Got great depth on it.
Blake.
A very uncertain first game from Ernests Gulbis, and the best possible start for this man.
Premier jeu.
I don't know whether that's nerves or what really from Gulbis, but that certainly was a very untidy opening game against a higher ranked opponent, and you really don't want to hand them those sort of opening service games, because it just puts in Blake's mind that this man is maybe nervous, maybe he's not as confident as he should be out here, and this being his least favourite surface, that's absolutely the ideal start for the American.
That was one of the things Murray did so well yesterday, making sure he got off to the best possible start, breaking in the first game, set up by choosing to receive when he won the toss of the coin at the net. Knocked the stuffing out of Akasuso from the word go. That's better.
Zero cans. Hands up.
Well, he's missed quite some margin there, Gulbis, which again is a little bit of surprise. Double fault at the end of last game, but certainly he's struggling to get to terms with his court, you feel.
Well, that's become a very familiar 1-2 from James Blake over the years, hasn't it? The cross-court backhand that really takes his opponent way out beyond the tram lines on the backhand wing. And even though Gulbis made it across to the forehand down the line, you always felt there was only going to be one winner of that rally.
Frontal.
Just needs to settle here, the Latvian, and just get some balls back in the court, particularly onto Blake's backhand.
He is struggling for the range on that forehand, isn't he? There's two in the game that are nearer the backboard than the baseline by some distance. If I were that line judge over there, I'd get the body armour out. It's heading her way. Maybe he's trying to tell us something. British involvement in the men's singles here that goes beyond Andy Murray. That's James Keolavong, the umpire of today's match. Brother of British #1 women's player Anne Keolavong, and he's becoming quite a regular on ATP and Grand Slam events around the world. One of the younger officials on the tour, but certainly his reputation rising all the time.
And Anne, of course, a couple of weeks ago, breaking into the world's top 100 for the first time. So she's onwards and upwards, we hope.
Well, Blake didn't get hold of the forehand as he would have liked, but he covered the net well.
Avantage Blake.
Yeah, Gulbis really struggling to find sort of a pattern of play at the moment that's going to be effective there. He was just sort of sitting back too much and being a little too passive.
Blake. Blakeman 2-0.
American who was through to the final in Houston on the red clay in the States. Perhaps a little bit different over there. Balls a little livelier, a bit quicker. Sometimes you sort of take those results with a pinch of salt. But a couple of wonderful wins in Rome, it has to be said, against Seppi and Verdasco. An early loss in Barcelona to Dennis Grimmelmeyer. But seeing how well he played against Djokovic in that opening set, that's not such a bad loss now. But as I say, a couple of wonderful wins over two very, I think, adaptable clay quarters in Seppi and Verdasco, and a tight loss to Wawrinka as well.
Ronzel.
This Grimmelmeyer is a man who's done very well against the big names this year. Terrific match, as Mark says, against Djokovic here, and gave Federer trouble in Estoril, Federer's bonus clay court tournament of the year. Played an extra event there in Portugal, slipping it in before Monte Carlo. Well, best moments from Gulbis so far have come on that backhand side down the line.
40. Gulbis.
Just the sort of service hold you'd like when you've lost the first two games of the match.
Well, he's got some skills and he's got some weapons, Gulbis, but as we've seen in that opening 9 minutes, he struggles at times to sort of bring it all together. But he has got time on his side. What is he, 20 this year? And so perhaps another couple of years of playing on the tour for Gulbis will allow him to mature into the player that many people feel he can be. And he's not from the background as well that perhaps many would think, coming from Latvia. You feel as though, well, here's a guy that sort of had to strive and struggle and everything else. But coming from a background, his father an investment banker, and has obviously been allowed to go to some of the best places in the world to train. Nicky Pilić's in Germany. is a question really for him just to bring it all together. As you say, he's got a great backhand as well as a good forehand, but the forehand at the moment has been misfiring, and that serve. So it's a very important, I think, 18 months really for Gulbis in terms of where he can reach his potential that he can fulfill.
Yes, his problem growing up in Riga, Ernests Gulbis, wasn't so much finding a tennis court. He said facilities actually weren't too bad at the time. It was actually finding someone to play against. Unfortunately, I think he roped a few of his friends into becoming hitting partners, token hitting partners. But he quickly realised he needed to leave the tennis hotbed of Latvia in order to get better practice elsewhere, hence turning up in Germany.
Kanza. Kanza front.
I don't think Blake will be too pleased with his forehand so far. Plenty of errors on that wing in the early stages.
Ditto for Gulbis, unless this is called in.
I don't think Blake's convinced that James Gulbis has got the right mark there, but looking at the pictures, there wasn't a particular mark in evidence.
Hands count.
No way. You called it way before I had it.
Well, he's overruled it, the umpire.
There's no way you can call that his point. There's no way.
And Blake's saying Blake's saying they should have played a let.
You've got to be kidding me. There's no way. That call came so early. I could have caught the ball. I mean, you hear the crowd, right? And you know they're right and you're wrong. It's not, I mean, how could you honestly thought the ball was past me and I couldn't get to that? He didn't even hit it hard. It was sitting there. It's a clear winner. Have you ever seen me run?
That's some good morning entertainment there from James Blake. He's absolutely convinced that James Gulbis has got this decision wrong. He's given the point to Gulbis, so it's break point. Oh, great recovery. And Blake using the argument with the umpire there, I think, to prove a point and to G himself up and get himself into this match.
Roland Garros.
And to win a point as well. Stunning forehand there from the American. I have to say, I think he was absolutely correct in his argument there.
Filet, premier service.
I have absolutely no doubt he would have been able to lay a racket on that ball.
Still break point there.
Caranta. Avantage Blake.
I think you should play two, don't you?
The centre line judge there correcting his call. Well, not immediately, after a sort of couple of seconds consideration. But this time Blake's got the point. And now he's got the game, and well, you can't argue with that recovery from 15-40 down. I think good job for James Kjoldemann that there isn't a change of ends at this moment, because his ears might be burnt by the end of it. I'm not convinced Blake could have got to that.
Oh, come on.
It was a very useful angle from Gulbis, and Blake would have been in the first row. The crowd tried to retrieve that.
You can't judge somebody like James Blake on your own athletic prowess.
And 0. Round 0. Round 0.
Well, that's the way he plays, and that's the way he's been effective over the last couple of years. James Blake really looking to get on the front foot on the return, particularly on that backhand side as well. That's some big serving from Gulbis, who you said looked a little bit like Andy Murray at the start of this match, or the new Andy Murray, but for me he looks like a very young Vince Spadea.
Vince Spadea, a man who went out of the competition yesterday in 5 sets. Oh, here comes the banter, by the way, between Blake and the umpire, but he might as well let it rest. He's a break up.
That's not fair to me. It's fair for me to get an umpire that's competent, that knows my ability, that knows that I could have caught that ball. So now I got to run him down.
See?
The poor umpires.
I mean, the poor umpires.
they can't answer back, can they?
You just can't hear what he's saying. His microphone's not turned up.
But he wasn't answering back, was he? He was just nodding. Blake was saying it's only fair to me to get a competent umpire, and poor bloke's just nodding.
He's right. He would have caught it, as he said.
Anyway, Vince Spadea, I'm glad you mentioned him. A result which may have passed you by yesterday. Lost from two sets love up, wasn't he?
Against Beneteau. No, Beneteau was 2 sets low up. Vince came
Vince
back.
got it back to
5th set.
2-all.
Yeah.
Went to a 5th set. Won. Vince Spadea, who fancies himself as a rapper, as I'm sure you're aware, Mark, and many people who follow tennis are. He's been known to go off in press conferences, and last night it happened again. A question, which was a disgrace in itself. Toe-to-toe with Beneteau? I mean, this journalist needs to lose his badge immediately. The reply, no, I got no dough. Crowd wouldn't leave me alone. No, I got to pay for my phone. Go home, my life is alone. I mean, someone's paid to actually take this down.
Premier service.
I think it would liven up tennis press conferences, Mark, if players, had to deliver their platitudes in a musical style of our choosing.
Yes, I think it could get old quite quickly, though, if that's the response.
Round 0.
I don't think Simon Cowell's got his number just yet.
Round 0. Je Blake. Blake mène 4-2.
3 love service holds in the last 4 games. And remember, Blake recovered from 15-40 with a string of 4 points in a row in his last service game, so serve very much dominating at the moment. Gulbis at 2-4, first set.
Well, there's something perhaps Blake's going to struggle with over the course of his career on clay, is actually getting that slide right. You can see the timing here. He's actually run it down and then slid afterwards, and many times we watched Nadal just slide into that for perfect balance and then hit the shot and then recover. Oh.
Kansas.
Well, that's what happens when the serve really just goes into Blake's hitting zone. You could see that that was below shoulder height, so it was perfect for the one-hander.
Yeah, and to be fair, Blake makes it come into the hitting zone as well by the fact that he takes the ball so early and gets himself inside the baseline.
Kansas 30.
Doesn't have a lot of structure to his game, Gulbis. I mean, he sort of almost hits the ball wherever he feels like it at the time, but there doesn't seem to be much of a pattern of play or how he feels as though he's going to sort of be successful. He's a good ball striker, and you can see that again with a well-delivered first serve. But in terms of actually sort of building his points, Agassi talked about it on clay, saying that, you know, he felt he was most successful when the rallies were like 6 to 8 shots, and anything longer than that perhaps weren't going to hold him in good stead.
40-30. Je Gulbis. Balle 9, s'il vous plaît.
Just talking about Vince Spadea, obviously James Blake wasn't entirely happy, was he, with Vince when he wrote that book, and felt as though Spadea had crossed the line in terms of what he had divulged in the book from the locker room, and certainly I don't think there's any love lost there. Is there any other little anecdotes from Vince's press conference?
Well, he was asked what he's going to do next, because obviously if you lose in the French Open early, it's pretty much the grass court season. So he says he's got a challenger next week, and then he says, I'm in Queens. I'm just grinding. I'm going to be the modern day warrior. This is Vince Spadea, everybody.
I bet Queens is delighted to hear that.
He's going to be the modern day warrior. And in terms of his future after tennis, he says he might want to work for the USTA, or on the other hand, I may want to get a cup and stand outside a building in New York. There's a lot of people over there, man. Think about it. A quarter a person. I'll just rap to them. There's a guy that stands out with a mic on Hollywood Boulevard. He just raps to everybody. He's got the coins.
Yes.
So good luck, Vince, in whatever you do. But we have to say you do liven up the occasional press conference, and if you haven't seen him in full flow with the mic, then there is various footage of him floating about on the internet. Look out for his coach as well in the background. Another big 5-set win yesterday was for Paul-Henri Mathieu. First time in his career he'd come from 2 sets to love down to win a match. It's normally him losing from 2 sets to love up. Turned it round yesterday. A little bit of touch from both men for the first time in the match.
15-0.
Definitely not his best ever drop shot for the American, but Gulbis handing it back to Blake.
It was slightly telegraphed, wasn't it?
Just a touch.
Round 0. 40. Je Blake.
Just all feels a little low-key.
Blake mène 5 jeux à 3.
Well, I agree. I'm not sure whether it was the big build-up you gave to the weather conditions that are apparently coming in that has made it feel a bit low-key, or Gulbis' play, because I have to say, I mean, I'm actually staggered at how many mistakes he's made. I mean, just off routine shots, but not just miss it. I mean, miss it by some distance.
Zero. Kansas.
And on one hand, the Latvian's sort of demeanour is good because he sort of shrugged off these mistakes, but on the other hand, you wouldn't mind to see a little bit of passion from him right now.
Front cans. Cans.
Good serving from Gulbis in that game. Really very good. And from his point of view, well, he's been very solid on serve ever since the first game, which he lost on his own serve, which is the single break that is probably going to lose him this set unless he can do something on the Blake serve in a few moments' time. Love service hold, love service hold, hold to 30, hold to 15. If he can keep that going for the rest of the match, then he's got a chance of an upset here. But
well, he's got a chance of being competitive, but I'm still not totally convinced about how he's going to win his points at the back of the court. And I feel against Blake, you know, you want to build those rallies. You want to try and get the ball up high to his single-hander on the backhand side. You want to try and keep him involved in rallies, and yet Gulbis really trying to go after it even before the American, which is a huge surprise. And certainly early on in a match like this, you expect him to come out and sort of just rally, see where Blake's game's at. But he's really sort of handed this opening set to James Blake, but he clearly has a lot of potential. He has the ability to maybe knuckle down and put a few more balls in court. And as you say, quite right, Jonathan, he has held serve convincingly, but at the same time, I don't feel totally convinced that he's going to manage to do that consistently throughout the course of the match. Very reliant on his first serve. Hasn't been effective, as you can see there, on Blake's second serve.
Zero cans.
That was a big point, and Gulbis stepped up the aggression a little bit and does have some success on the Blake second serve there to give him half a chance at love 30.
Blake just a little bit short with his previous forehand. You can see Gulbis there with a little bit of time to take the ball up the line and took it to the American's baseline.
Gains the front.
Second ace from Blake. Great shot.
Hands 40.
Was lulling us into some sort of false sense of security that Blake was going to win this set, Gulbis, and he's come alive here in the 10th game.
Terrific recovery from Blake there.
30-40.
Reminiscent, really, of the point that he saved at 15-40 on his other service game when he was down break points after the discussion with the umpire. Had a wonderful forehand up the line then.
Still break point. Late call there. Nobody's particularly sure. On the line. On the line. So that'll be juice, presumably, if Kjotevong sticks to his previous decision, because it's pretty much the same area of the sideline. The question is, could Gulbis have reached it?
Well, Gulbis got the ball back, didn't he?
Do you know, I missed that one. Blake had too much to do there. There was too much open court, and Gulbis has struck back when he had to level this first set.
And that's the difference between hard courts and clay courts for James Blake. That backhand down the line there was just fundamentally the wrong shot, because it just gave Gulbis acres of space to hit his forehand into, and he just had too far to run there. He just needed to put the ball back high, cross court, even a slice. A nice slow slice, get it back, recover his position, and he just really handed Gulbis a golden opportunity.
Well, he started playing. This is the Ernests Gulbis we know, the promise we know. It's taken him a little while to find his feet in the conditions here, and only in the last 5-10 minutes or so has he really shown the skills that we know he possesses. Skills that are going to be dangerous for Blake in this match.
Round 0.
In some ways, Blake can count himself a little bit unlucky, because the line call that came at 30-40 was ultimately to his disadvantage, because he was actually just about to put the ball away. It was a nice short return from Gulbis, and unfortunately for the American, he ended up having to replay the point, missed his first serve.
Oh! 40. Gulbis.
He's turned it around. And another confident service hold.
Gulbis mène 6-5.
That same umpire that screwed me twice now? Oh, that's good. You should still have a job.
Well, I think there we've got to stick up for the umpire, because
Why?
as you quite rightly said, the correct call was what was eventually given, and it actually worked against James Blake, but that wasn't the umpire's fault, because he ended up giving the right decision. And it was just bad luck for Blake that, as you quite rightly said, it would have been better had the rally continued.
He just needs to keep a lid on his emotions here, Blake, because otherwise he's going to end up letting this opening set get away from him. And as you say, it was a little unfortunate for the American, but it goes with the territory.
A member of the Rolling Stones behind Gulbis there. The stripy shirt, front row. So pressure now on Blake to serve to stay in the set. He had the chance to serve forward at 5-4.
15-0. Front 0. Round 0.
Certainly a very difficult match to predict at the moment. Huge swings one way and then the other.
Round 15. Round 30. Je Blake.
So it's a tie break.
6 jeux partout. Jeu décisif.
Only 38 minutes played. It's a pretty rapid fire clay court match. Nice play. Very nicely done from Gulbis. Perfect way to start the breaker.
1-0, Gulbis.
Intelligent thinking there, knowing that Blake was trying to cover the gap cross court there and there was going to be some space up the line for that forehand.
Deux, 0, Gulbis.
Not a lot is going right for James Blake at the moment. And Gulbis, who hasn't in fact won a tie-break this year, he's lost all 6 he's played, is now in a pretty commanding position at 3-love. 2 points, 1 on the Blake serve. Clear this one isn't going to go Blake's way either. No. Blake again trying to convince the umpire that that's not the right mark. Well, he's got to try everything at the moment because he's 4-love down.
At 0. Gulbis.
Almost kamikaze stuff there from Blake.
0. Gulbis.
Well, the frustration just bubbling over for the American now. He's let his chance slip in this first set.
He has to get back into striking the ball as cleanly as that.
Gulbis.
It was an interesting attempt from Blake a couple of points ago. And he said to the umpire, "You sure it wasn't the mark on the left?" Just testing him. No. There have been some quite good umpire heckles from players this year. Remember the Andy Roddick one at the Australian Open where he shouted to the kids in the stand, "Go to school, kids, otherwise you might be an umpire." So 2 service points to come for the Latvian.
5-2. Gulbis.
He wins them both. He's won the set from a breakdown.
Gulbis.
Blake considering doing irreparable damage to his racket, thinking better of it. Four set points. Just needs the one. That has been a really, really terrific recovery from Ernests Gulbis. He was 5-3 down when he started playing his best tennis. And it's the 19-year-old who is in front. And Thomas Berdych went out yesterday, the 11th seed, but if Blake were to go today, it would be the biggest casualty of the men's draw so far. At the moment, Mark Petchey, Gulbis has sort of answered your early questions. He's strung a sequence of baseline play together, which is proving very effective against the more experienced American, and he looks like he's enjoying it.
At what?
Okay, he has. He's served beautifully, I have to say. I mean, he's really won a high percentage of his first serves. He's up around 60%. We'll see it here. There you go, 59%. But really getting the job done with his first serve, and Blake unable to sort of knock balls back in the court. I think that's been the most disappointing thing for the American in some respects. I think he's sitting there just still fuming about the fact that he should have probably won that set had he not got the bad call at 30-40. So Blake just needs to sort of get himself under control. But well, some stats there that don't really relay what happened in that opening set. It wasn't necessarily a set that was full of winners and great shots, but as I say, the stats there would suggest that that was exactly what happened. He said about the French Open, said we Americans come to Roland Garros and set the bar so low that by the first Sunday we've hurdled over it. I think that, perhaps is the way that Blake is thinking right now. Certainly doesn't have his sort of US Open demeanour on this court.
No, and he is a player who thrives on a big match atmosphere, isn't he? He loves playing under the lights at Roland Garros, loves getting his family and friends into the stadium.
In the J block.
15-0.
Yes, heavy conditions, dank conditions, breeze, number one court, clay under your feet. Not quite James Blake territory. That was a nice serve.
Front 0.
Third ace from him.
What were you like?
Front 15.
On clay.
Yeah, overcome the odds. You know, when you had to create the atmosphere in your head. Were you good?
In my matches as a kid, played to an average audience of 1, my opponent.
Current 15.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, he's got to almost shut out the environment and imagine he is playing in New York and imagine it is a concrete court. Sometimes with the American players, you feel they're beaten before they've even arrived here.
Delay. Second service.
Certainly their attitude towards the Monte Carlo tournament, the first Masters Series event of the year on clay, has been nothing short of disgraceful over the years. Sam Querrey, ridiculously the only American who turned up this year, and he was rewarded by a quarter-final showing. So well done him, but it would be nice to see some of his compatriots actually make the effort and come over to play what is, after all, a mandatory tournament.
They've had a few umpires, haven't they? In recent years, they've come over. In fact, I think if you were to go back over the last couple of years, they've actually outnumbered the players.
Again, very competent from Ernests Gulbis. Blake didn't do enough with that shot, the forehand. That was really the one that allowed Gulbis to dictate from the net. And these really are just warm-up volleys, aren't they? Still very secure, though.
Kansas.
I think one of the major problems about the Americans coming to Monte Carlo is the proximity of the Houston tournament that you were talking about earlier, Mark, the week before. If they all enter that and do well, then it's almost practically impossible to make the journey across to the different continent to play a couple of days later.
That's, of course, if you're putting the Houston event on the same path as a Monte Carlo Master Series, which is rich in tradition and points and money.
There's some strange arguments coming from the players' camps in the last few months about scheduling issues. Some of their arguments you can totally understand, but often there's a slightly contradictory tone to much of what they say.
Fronta.
For the Americans, too awkward to get from Houston to Monte Carlo. Well, answer, you don't have to play Houston. For Nadal, too much clay court tennis. But he doesn't have to play Barcelona. Okay, it's his home event, but the bottom line is he doesn't have to play it. Could have given himself a week off.
Caron to front.
And this, I think, Mark, is one of the key factors in this whole argument about the schedule. Everyone seems to be agreed that there's too much tennis, but the bottom line surely is the players, if they do have a week off, they're going to find themselves playing somewhere. They can command too much money. That's the bottom line.
Do you think there's too much tennis?
Gulbis.
Well, I mean, I only asked that question because Yeah, okay, you know, your mandatory tournaments are your 9 Masters Series and then your 4 Grand Slams. And yes, obviously, to contribute to your ranking, you could play 5 other events at the moment. But, you know, Fed last year played 2 other events. And this year maybe he's going to play 5 because he wants to protect his world #1 ranking. But the reality is, I mean, what they're actually asking at the moment, I know it's changing next year with the 500s, but virtually, you've only got to play sort of 17 weeks of tennis. I don't think it's excessive.
No, I absolutely agree with you, Mark. And it's when those other tournaments come into the debate, when they don't have to come into the debate. Like Nadal saying, I've got to play every week on clay. Again, he doesn't have to. It's just unfortunate for him that the one tournament that he should be taking off is the one he loves the most in Barcelona.
Incidentally, the last person to beat him in Barcelona.
Well, he's won 4 years in a row, hasn't he?
He has.
So, go on. Who?
Alex Corretja.
Well, that was an opportunity for Gulbis. Love 30 point. A short ball. Maybe he was thinking about his position at the net behind the approach before he actually executed the initial shot.
Toronto.
And that's Blake at his best, at his explosive best as well. 1-2 punch.
Caron to Toronto. Blake.
Going with serve so far in the second set.
Balle neuf, s'il vous plaît. Blake mène
I think as well the players' problems right now, and as I say, I think a lot of people can understand where they're coming from in terms of not wanting to be dictated to by officials in suits who don't necessarily know the ins and outs of the touring game. But the minute the officials try to do something, i.e. downgrade Hamburg and Monte Carlo and try and free up a little bit of space in that congested time of year ahead of the French Open, the players kick up a fuss and say, well, how can you downgrade our favourite tournament at Monte Carlo? We love going there. We stay in a 19-star hotel.
Well, again, I have to say I sympathise with the players, because the reality is the only people that don't really like Monte Carlo over the last few years is, as you say, the Americans. And you can't dictate an entire tournament just because one nation doesn't particularly want to come over because it doesn't fit in with their schedule. And that, again, is the bottom line with a lot of the players. I mean, the summer swing with Toronto and Cincinnati, you know, I mean, it was proposed to the players to put a week's gap in between those two Masters Series events, which everybody would like. The European players didn't want to go over there and stay over there that long. They didn't want to go over next week, which is the same argument that the Americans make about Monte Carlo. Yet, you've signed up to play a global tour. You kind of need to buy into it. I'm not saying that it would be the right thing to do, but one of the ways of solving it would clearly be bring back the sort of average of 12 where they had before, rather than you can play 18 events and it's your best 18. If every tournament you played counted, you'd start seeing players being a little more selective about which events they wanted to play. Tournament directors clearly wouldn't go for that though.
Well, that is the first double fault in this set from Gulbis, his second of the match. Previous one was break point down in the very first game. I'm sorry, but what are you doing leaving that ball? You might think it's flying out, but at 15:30. It's a very dangerous policy to let that one go. But he recovers well.
Roland Garros.
Great serve there from Gulbis. All credit to him here, saving those couple of break points. Yes, it certainly seemed a little sloppy from the Latvian, really leaving that previous one at 15:30, but he's recovered nicely here.
Avantage Gulbis. Gulbis.
That's really the first time in the match that Gulbis has had to get himself out of trouble on his own serve, and the first time he's successfully done it. Of course, he was break point down in the game he lost in the first set, and Blake converted it. Other than that, Gulbis has been holding serve pretty comfortably until that game. So it was good to see a little bit of fight to dig himself out of the hole.
Outwardly, he looks quite casual at times, Gulbis. He looks like you know, he's happy just to do whatever is going on the court at the time. I haven't seen a lot of real passion from him. It's a struggle for Blake, isn't it, at the moment? You just tell that he's almost, I don't know, waiting around for something to happen, for something to inspire him out here.
It's just a struggle just even to get the ball through the court, isn't it? You can just tell he's winding up, he's giving them everything. But of course the clay and the heavy conditions not assisting his natural game.
Blake. Blakeman, 3 jeux de 2.
Just to wrap up on the scheduling debate we were having, I mentioned the Hamburg tournament in addition to the Monte Carlo one. Those were the two tournaments they wanted to downgrade initially. They've come to a resolution about Monte Carlo. It's still going to have the same status and prize money and ranking points, but it won't be mandatory. But as I say, everyone likes to go anyway, apart from the Americans, because it's a nice place to take the family. But as for Hamburg, well, that's interesting because legal papers served by the tournament against the ATP remain firmly in the in tray of the courts of Delaware and the United States, and the hearing is going to be in July unless some resolution can be found before then. And of course, if Hamburg extraordinarily managed to win that case and overturn the proposal to downgrade their tournament, then it basically makes the ATP redundant as a power-making body, because they're the ones who want to make the changes to their own calendar, and if every decision they take is going to be challenged in the courts of law, then what hope have they got?
It's a big decision. I mean, actually, I don't think it's had that much publicity compared to the ramifications it might have on the outcome, but yeah, it's certainly going to be a fascinating one to watch.
You have to assume that a resolution will be made before then, but from what I understand, the Hamburg people are digging their heels in. They're not interested in the money, they're just interested in the status of their tournament. Nice from Gulbis.
And we've seen some really nice touches from him and some genuine ability to finish off points against the top-ranked American. It's a little sporadic, but it's certainly there.
Of course, Andy Roddick not here at the French Open this year. Injured himself in Rome, pulling out of the semi-final, and hasn't recovered in time. Quite interesting, though, to hear the official doctor of the French Federation say the other day, well, we all know why Andy Roddick is here. He doesn't like the clay. It's like quite an extraordinary statement to make from someone who probably, presumably, hasn't examined Andy Roddick's shoulder recently.
Well, it's actually his back he hurt in Rome, isn't it? But is that a sort of a medical diagnosis?
Wait, please.
Well, sometimes I think the players do use that sort of excuse as a medical diagnosis, don't they? Two break points for Blake here. That does actually lead us on to another interesting discussion about proposed changes on the ATP Tour. The whole idea of suspensions that is going to come in. Oh, and it's long from Gulbis, and just a little bit too much enthusiasm there. Got a little bit carried away, break point down.
Blakeman, 4 jeux de 2.
Well, that's the sort of game I thought Gulbis would throw in once a set as we went through this match, but he managed to recover nicely in that opening set. But you just feel as though it's just around the corner, a game where he's just going to make a host of unforced errors, and if you can just hang around long enough, you're going to be able to take advantage of it.
Just a little wayward now on that forehand. This is the opportunity he sensed for Blake to stamp his authority on this, not only on the second set, but also on the match. Blake knows it. You just see it in that rally, the way he played it.
Round 0.
World-class tennis here and world-class ball striking from James Blake, really dominating that rally. Gulbis playing second fiddle.
Count 0.
Again, just not a good enough recovery slice there from Gulbis, setting up invitingly for the American. Doesn't need to be asked twice.
Count 15. Lakeman sanctions it.
So, Mark, as part of the relaunch of the men's calendar in 2009, the idea of player suspensions if they withdraw for a poor excuse from mandatory tournaments. But of course that then begs the question, when is a genuine injury excuse not a genuine injury excuse? Doesn't that open a can of worms?
It certainly does. Is there an answer to that question or not? Because I feel it's more sort of rhetorical than anything, because it's very difficult to say, isn't it? What you know, is a genuine excuse? Is it injury? Is it something that's physical? Is it something that's mental? Is it, yeah, what happens if it's personal? How do you judge what will be deemed as a suspendable offence? And I think, as you say, it is really see it in other sports, do you? I mean, I don't know. Is there?
I mean,
is there a precedent anywhere else? I don't think in golf you know, pull out of an event because you're tired, you get suspended for a month.
I mean, you obviously want the best players at the best tournaments. I mean, that's stating the obvious. But you'd like to think that you could attract the players to those tournaments by means other than threatening them with, you know, suspensions if they don't turn up.
Well, it didn't work at school for you, did it?
But also there's another issue that, as I understand it, the suspension would be from the tournament in the following year where you've got the most ranking points to defend. Now that's kind of hard luck on that tournament, isn't it? That tournament's going to be deprived of a good player. Maybe even the defending champion. And with most things in tennis these days, this is one of those things where you end up wondering to yourself, has anyone thought of that?
Well, as you say, I think people have been sort of thinking about it and talking about it and wondering how you're going to be able to sort of put it into practice.
Ground 0.
I mean, if you look at last year, I think the players ultimately played all the Masters Series events, and they brought back the bonus pool, and surprise, surprise, there was a reason to play Madrid and Paris.
Well, there'll be more of a reason to play Madrid and Paris from next year anyway, because the end of season Masters is moving to London, so it just makes the ease of travel just that little bit simpler for the players who in the last 3 years have had to go to Shanghai the week after Paris. But unfortunately, we have a situation in men's tennis at the moment where the leading players have practically no confidence in the leadership of the actual tour, and it's a worrying situation.
Gulbis.
So Gulbis hangs on and asks the question of Blake to serve out the set again,
Blake
like he
minutes,
had to
thank
try
you
to
to
do
all.
at 5-4 in the first. Couldn't do it, and Gulbis went on to win the set. So the Latvian will be hoping for that situation again here. Do you feel, Mark, that Blake has more of a spring in his step in the last 15 minutes or so?
No, I do think he's going to serve it out this game, but I just feel as though, yeah, there's, again, I don't know whether he's trying to manage his emotions, manage his sort of physical exertions in this match, but yeah, he hasn't really ignited it as I would have expected against somebody who I'm sure he expects to beat.
Oh, let off for Blake.
Jan Zero.
I'm not sure whether he's finding it difficult to play Gulbis, to be honest. It's a first meeting, and I think it is awkward to get a rhythm against the Latvian.
Kansa. Kansa Trunks. Pronta. Folks.
Very short second serve from Blake, punished by Gulbis. Break point.
Front count.
And that's sort of what I mean. Suddenly Gulbis decides to take the ball early, go in and start attacking your second serve. Never quite sure what's coming from him.
Fantastic forehand up the line. Break point down.
Caranta.
That wasn't a bad cross-court forehand from Gulbis at all. But Blake spotted the opening. Great play, Gulbis so deep at the far end. Blake pinning him back with the ground strokes and choosing the right moment to come in. Just textbook play, and that low volley not easy. Oh! Got a match at the moment, haven't we?
Suddenly come alive. Wonderful tennis by both men.
Égalité. Yeah. Avantage, Gulbis.
Blake there just querying whether his serve was in or not, hoping it might be a fault. Second break point.
Égalité. Avantage, Blake. Delay, premier service.
That was a good second serve from Blake. And he's levelled the match.
Seychelles at 1. Une manche partout.
Well, he did serve it out. It wasn't easy though, that's for sure. And Gulbis, well, he's pretty difficult to figure out, I think, for us and also for James Blake, because one minute he's making errors and the next minute he's ripping backhands up the line on down set point. And I think that's what's making it a little bit of an awkward encounter for James Blake at the moment, is that he's not really able to impose himself on the match. He's kind of feeling, I think, what everybody senses when they play James Blake, that he's really in control of proceedings, where it's really sort of up to Gulbis what's happening out here, which is a slight surprise. But he's very in and out. You see some nice touch there from the Latvian in this particular rally. Blake going backwards and then having to try and get forward. But it's a nice recovery, because he was very frustrated after that opening set. Felt as though he should have won it. Had a few words with the umpire, but has hit back with some solid tennis. Good high percentage of first serves in. And once again, a match that suggests that there are more winners going on, which is a bit of a change for most of the clay court tennis we've seen, because it's usually littered with unforced errors, and that generally is the stat that you take most notice of.
Although looking at those figures there, it's amazing how these sort of stats differ when you travel around the world from tournament to tournament. When you go to someone like Australia or whatever, and I'm sure the whoever the work experienced boy is who taps in the unforced errors, it would probably be about 30 in Australia and 1 here. It's all about how you interpret the nature of the error, isn't it? And when is an unforced error not an unforced error?
When you're playing Nadal, it's never an unforced error.
Well, set 3.
Troisième manche.
Gulbis has shown plenty of his promise out here. Blake hasn't always looked like he's particularly enjoying the occasion, but he's back in the match. Great speed, and he finishes it off. Second time of asking. Credit to Blake for getting to that angled drop shot from Gulbis. I thought the rally was over.
Again, I think, Jonathan, you've got to be careful judging everybody by your own athletic prowess. It's a nice run though from the Latvian. He did well to pick it up and end up finishing off the point.
Listen, I'm used to this sort of abuse in radio, and I expect a little more decorum over here in TVville.
You're going to be sadly disappointed then.
And c'est wrong.
It's almost unforgivable, really, for Gulbis to miss a shot like that, especially at the start of this vital third set.
Delay. Premier service.
He broke a string with the first serve there, so got a little bit lucky the fact that he got the net cord. Of course, if you miss your first serve and you break a string, then you have to hit a second serve with the new racket.
Fronta.
Even Blake could get to that one. Good decision, the right moment, because as you can see, he's just inside the baseline there. And Blake was deep beyond his.
Gulbis. Premier jeu, troisième manche.
I mean, the opportunity really there at 15:30 for James Blake, just couldn't get the second serve return back into court and allow Gulbis to potentially miss. He just missed with that off forehand, so a little bit of pressure was building on the teenager, but he does possess a wonderful serve. And again, you just have to say, you watch him play and he's got the entire package. Gulbis, I mean, we've seen some nice touch, we've seen big serves and everything else, but just at the moment doesn't seem to have the structure in place to play it consistently.
He's just sent that racket off to be restrung.
15-0.
What time did you say it was going to rain?
Filet, premier service. Answer.
He'd almost done the hard work on the other side of the court, Blake. And then when he moved over to Gulbis's backhand wing, just the aim was slightly out. Three o'clock now, apparently. We're expecting the bad weather to arrive. Just, you know, about 3 hours after initially anticipated.
Fronta.
It's actually reasonably bright out here in Paris at the moment, and the wind has died down a little bit since start of play as well. Gulbis just slipping slightly as he went into the forehand.
It'd be interesting to see during the course of this match that how many big points Gulbis loses by making the unforced error, and it would be quite a high number right now. Suddenly you play a point like that with a great return, and yet I feel as though that sort of feeds his enthusiasm to play the way that he is, and there's a certain amount of charm to it and abandon, but at the same time, if he's really going to get up there and challenge the top players in the world, you can't feel that he's going to do that playing the way that he is at the moment. Like that. I mean, out of nowhere. I mean, this is a big game all of a sudden. He's dropped the second set. He's got some chances here on Blake's opening service game of third set to get some momentum to get back into this match. And he tries to hit a forehand drop shot return.
Égalité.
Yes, you feel his career isn't going to turn into one of Mr. Consistency, is it?
Avantage Blake.
It's going to be up and down. Both during matches and as a career as a whole, I would anticipate.
Sure, Blake.
And Blake closes out a tight game.
Angers partout.
Yeah, it would be disappointing if he doesn't really hit the heights as well, because just watching him in terms of just pure ball striking, you feel Gulbis has got it. You know, he times the ball great. He can generate pace through this court, which is not easy to do. Even Blake's struggling a little bit on his forehand side. But in terms of understanding how he's most effective on a tennis court, you feel as though the teenager not quite there yet.
Oh, that's a monster forehand, though.
And he does seemingly have limitless potential as well when you see a shot like that.
Front zero.
Blake almost digging a trench in the clay with his slide there. You can see the mark just in front of the net. Oh, and again he manages to dig out these shots from almost nowhere.
40.
Short arm jab up the line there from Gulbis. Ooh, not particularly conventional, but effective. Oh, how about that? A bit of serve and volley to finish off the game. Well, that's what we're talking about. That's the talent, the variety, the expressiveness of Ernests Gulbis as a player. But what's the betting? We maybe see a few wayward shots in the next game. That's the life of Ernest.
It is at the moment, and yeah, it's. I mean, it's great to watch in some ways. I mean, as a pure neutral and just watching the match, I mean, I'd enjoy going and watch him play, because you're not quite sure what's going to happen. There's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So from that perspective, it would be exciting. But if you were his coach and watching it from a purely sort of tactical point of view, you feel as though there's so much he could learn in terms of getting himself more consistent, as you said. You used a good word there, and. Breaking away from this score, that's a pretty nice win in the doubles there for a Brit.
Yes, Ross Hutchins teaming up with Stephen Huss, 6-4, 6-4 against Mahesh Bhupathi and Mark Knowles. The fourth seeds in the men's doubles competition. That is a very, very good win for Ross Hutchins, who made his Davis Cup debut for Britain earlier this year out in Argentina. Always good, I feel, to have a cluster of British players around, even if the majority of them are only in the doubles competition. I wonder whether Tim Henman's career could have been helped at times by just having more players around him, more people to socialise with, more people to offer encouragement courtside. In other words, more British players in the doubles competition. Over the years, maybe players have extended their singles career beyond their sell-by date. And perhaps a turn to doubles might have been the effective way to go. Certainly the decision that the likes of Jamie Murray, Ross Hutchins and James Auckland have taken in the last few years.
Front-zero.
Certainly not the greatest mover, a teenager, and I don't know whether that's a strength issue at this stage of his career or whether that's going to be something that holds him back. You can understand why he perhaps wants to play an offensive game to try and sort of limit the ability of his opponents to push him out of position.
Blake. Deux jeux partout.
Mentioned Jamie Murray. He's partnering Max Murney here, the 12th seeds. And they're playing later today against Robin Haase and Rick de Voost. Dutch-South African partnership. Virtually every grain of clay was covered during the course of that rally, and Gulbis finished it off really superbly.
15-0.
Yeah, a little bit surprised with that choice of shot from the Latvian, the slice forehand, and got away with it with the quality of that one right to Blake's baseline. You can see the disappointment etched on the American's face.
Front 0.
And again, exhibiting those skills that he does possess with those drop shots. And once again, the American slipping, struggling with his footing.
Front 15. Front time. Caron to Trent. Gulbis.
Still on serve in the set. Still no break points.
You don't get the sense that we're watching two potential Roland Garros champions out here, but just in terms of the way that they build their points on clay, you just feel as though against some of the more accomplished clay courts, they're just going to get outmaneuvered at times, and they're going to just offer up way too many unforced errors. And I just wonder whether that affects Blake's mindset as well coming into a tournament, that perhaps he feels as though he's got no shot of winning, but he's here and he's obviously competing hard and he wants to do as well as he can, but I just wonder whether he loses a little bit of what makes him James Blake in a tournament that he doesn't feel he can actually win.
He's never really done it on the grass either, Blake, has he? Made the final of Queen's a couple of years back, but really Wimbledon has been disappointing for him. What about Gulbis on the grass? Had a difficult first round draw at Wimbledon last year, Marcus Baghdatis, but actually won the first set of that match.
Well, you would think with his serve that he can certainly be competitive, and you can see already in this match, you know, he's got an ability on the return of serve to snap off some quick, easy returns for winners. So, given the change in nature of the grass, you feel as though Gulbis could certainly play well. I'm just not convinced about his movement. I'm not convinced about his movement on clay, and I'm certainly not convinced about it on a grass court as yet.
Kansas 0.
Great play by Blake. He can generate such an angle with that single-hander cross-court. Look how far out Gulbis was there. Actually did very well to get across for that one. I think Blake was probably always thinking 1 or 2 shots ahead in that rally.
Front Kansas.
Well, he may well have been, but again, I just think that Gulbis at times is just lacking that sense of where to stick the ball in a point like that. I mean, Blake was coming in from running around his forehand. He clearly had to go towards the middle of the court. I mean, from where he was, otherwise he was going to leave a huge gap there. So he has to be moving this way. You're playing on a clay court, very difficult to whack the brakes on and then cover the shot up the line. And Gulbis was there in plenty of time to fire it back up the line. And if you watch a guy like Nadal, I mean, how often do you see Nadal pass up the line on a clay court? For a very good reason, that it's difficult for the guys with their footwork to cover it. Because everybody drifts, whether you like it or not, slightly towards the middle. It takes a very brave person to come in straight up that channel and leave yourself, wide open to the cross-court pass.
No need for Hawkeye here at the French Open. The ball leaves the mark.
There was talk of having it though, wasn't there?
There was talk.
Was there any official reason why it wasn't implemented?
Well, not that I'm aware of. This year they've decided to give players a consistent 3 unsuccessful challenges using the Hawkeye challenge system on grass and hard courts around the world. I have to say it's not a decision that I actually agree with.
Front 0.
It used to be 2 and I'd have actually taken it down to 1.
Really? And your thought process behind that being?
The point is, it's not just 3 challenges per set, is it? Because it's 3 unsuccessful challenges. So if you're successful every time, it could be that you have 10 or 12 challenges a set. I think the dramatic nature of Hawkeye is when it is used for big decisions, not just for the sake of it challenges. Luck for Blake there, but by that I mean at times when you're absolutely certain the officials have got it wrong and you want to use it as the tool to correct that decision. I just think 3 challenges, unsuccessful challenges, you see an awful lot now of players just doing it for the sake of it, and it disrupts the flow of the match, and it doesn't actually add to the drama when you feel that players are pretty sure that the officials have got it right and are just doing it to use one up. That's the game for Gulbis, 4-3. I think if there was only 1 unsuccessful challenge allowed, then the players would have to be absolutely certain a mistake was made before gambling and using that as their challenge. What do you think?
I think you make a very salient point, actually, but I think that where it's probably going to fall down is the fact that it costs quite a bit of money to install it on a court, and if you're only ever going to use it once a set, it sort of probably would defeat the object for most tournament directors.
But hasn't it already been installed for the use of TV, though?
Yes.
It certainly was before it was used as an officiating aid. So isn't that where your argument breaks down?
Well, if you're asking me, therefore, if it's going to be used for TV. If you're asking me just solely as a tool for players and umpires, that's where I think your argument would break down. If you're asking me Do I think it's good for TV? Listen, I think it's a very difficult one. I think if you've got that sort of technology and you really believe in it, there's an argument to say that, you know, if there's a close call, you should always go to it to at least make sure that an outcome of a match is not decided by a poor line decision. Having said that, I mean, the unlimited challenges they had in the Davis Cup, I didn't really agree with, and I didn't think worked at all, because I think, as you say, there is an element of just throwing your finger up to say, I want to challenge it just for the sake of it, and eventually people are sort of switching off and not really even looking at the big screen. Do you think they should just have 3 challenges, whether it's successful or unsuccessful? Would that work for you? I'm trying to create an environment here, Jonathan, that you're happy with.
Yeah, no, maybe you're right. Three challenges, full stop.
Jans 0.
We've seen a few of those in this match, haven't we? Pretty loose net out here. And invariably, when the balls are smacking into the tape, they're just dribbling over like that one.
Jans at front.
And it could just be that it's that type of point that really sort of changed the predictable nature of this third set. It looks as though it's drifting towards a tiebreak, but a lucky net call for Gulbis.
Just wide. Gulbis giving it a long, hard look. More in hope than expectation.
Caron to front. Caronta.
Big point now. We haven't had a break point in this set.
And that right there in a nutshell is why Gulbis has been stuck in his search or his quest to get up the rankings. I mean, that is a huge point, and he's taking on such a sort of high-risk backhand over the high part of the net. He's never going to hit a winner anyway. Got away with that there, and Blake in good position to take that ball up the line. But Gulbis was, you know, 3 foot behind the baseline, and he's trying to take a double-hander up the line. And I think he makes it 1 out of 10. And in some shape or form, he kind of reinforces his belief that that's the right thing to do. But even if he had made it, Blake would have covered it and then just ripped his forehand into the cross-court space that was there for him. And he just feels as though Gulbis still just a touch naive on the tennis court.
Avantage Blake.
On that occasion, not trying to go for anything too spectacular, but the forehand breaking down quite miserably in the end. And Blake with a point to level at 4-all.
Jeu, Blake.
He didn't get the chance in the end, Gulbis, but the overriding feeling at the end of that game, it was there for him if he'd have played more sensible tennis.
Well, at least giving you a chance, giving himself a chance to break by playing more sensible tennis. I'm not saying he would have broken anyway, but you do feel as though he gifts too many points to his opponent at big moments. When the pressure's really on them, they're at deuce, they know one bad service game, suddenly their opponent's serving for it. You know, they're thinking about things like that. What they're looking for is a cheap point from their opponent, and Gulbis, unfortunately, too often in this match has handed it to Blake. And it's not to say that he's not going to win the match, but you feel that if he's going to be a serial winner on the tour, he's got to sort of cut that type of tennis out.
Delay, premier service. Front 0.
No, now that's the first really bad drop shot that Gulbis has played, and until that moment he'd been pretty wise in his selection of when to play it, and very effective in the way he executed the shot, but there neither was true. Two shockers in a row.
I think both of these two players excuse themselves from the drop shot clinic. Although we have seen some nice touches from Gulbis at times, but Blake certainly isn't necessarily that strong in playing that type of shot.
Gulbis. Gulbis wins 5 à 4.
Doing well to hang on there, Gulbis, and he doesn't ever seem to get too despondent, so I'd give him that as a huge plus in terms of his demeanour on the court, and his body language is seemingly very good. And as I said earlier, you do wonder whether there needs to be a little bit more passion from the teenager, but no, he's certainly got some time to find that balance, to get himself energised and ready to go, and also just obviously keep himself on a level playing field.
It's a very talented photographer by the name of Ella Ling, British snapper, whose work appears in many newspapers. Gulbis with the slightly higher percentage there on the points won on his first serve. And the second serve points too, so he's actually stepped that up a little bit. He's having a little bit more effect on the Blake second serve than he was earlier in the match. But it's certainly delicately poised here at 1-set-all, and Blake serving to stay in the third set at 4-5.
And 0.
This is where the pressure really on Blake as well. So you'd like to see Gulbis, you know, not just push the ball back in the court, hit it with a little bit of conviction, a little bit of purpose, but not go for too much.
Roland Garros.
Blake will be very annoyed that having reached the ball, reached the drop shot, and he certainly had plenty of time to get there, the amount of loop that was on the shot from Gulbis. Look how high that went. Blake gets there, plenty of time, but can't keep it in court.
Caron to Trent. Blake. Sanction factor.
It's a good hold from the American, but again, courtesy of a couple of unforced errors really from his opponent, allowing him a safe passage through to 5 games apiece.
Stopped moving there after the return came back from Blake. Resigned to the fact that he wasn't able to, well, I don't know, I mean, that's a very strange approach to have. Look at him, very languid down at the far end. Better there, a little more intensity, but still a little bit of fortune off the net cord.
Ganza.
Blake doing a pretty decent job there of scrambling at the back of the court, just trying to force his opponent to play one extra shot. Again, perhaps his greater experience in these situations coming to the fore.
Roland Garros.
Oh, first successful lob of the afternoon. I think it might even be the first attempt at a lob of the afternoon.
Toronto.
Very nicely executed.
Yeah, it's not a bad place to stick the ball as well, I think, to Gulbis in that sort of area of the court on his backhand, not quite sure what to do with it. Well, it's entertaining, I'll give him that, but I'm not sure, again, if you're his coach, you particularly like to see him go to that shot. He hasn't been altogether successful with that play.
Gulbis.
Well, he's done it, he's held on. Yes, 30 all point. Serving at 5 all when you haven't faced a break point on your serve for a long, long time. It's an interesting choice, but as you say, it makes for a more entertaining contest.
And that's why I think in his own mind, it literally is, when the ball comes over, it's whatever shot is in his mind at that time he goes for. And I'm not sure that the best players in the world think that way. I think they've already got an idea of what to do and where to stick it and their opponent's strengths and weaknesses. Yet Gulbis, you feel, is just completely sort of wrapped up in his own little world there, where it's about him and he's going to do whatever he feels like doing. And well, let's hope that it becomes successful, because if it does, then we're going to have a fantastic player in our hand, and one that is definitely watchable, a little in the same sort of realm of Fernando Gonzalez. But right now you feel as though that's just a little too casual. Like you said, he looked very languid after the opening point. It was a great return, and that's what Blake does. He takes away your time on a tennis court, and that's what makes him so dangerous and difficult to defend against. But as you say, there's sort of a lack of intensity after he sort of picked the ball up that you wonder if it's going to hold him back.
Well, Blake will be very keen to get this set and avoid the prospect of going to 5 here, because he doesn't have a particularly good 5-set record. Even though he's reversed the trend a little bit in the last year or so. He had lost his first 9 5-set matches. Took him until the US Open last year to record his first match over the full distance. His first win was against Fabrice Santoro. Last year's US Open, second round. Well, it's almost Gulbis-like play for Blake. He's played a wild shot there to put him in a bit of bother at love 30, serving to stay in the set. Oh, what a shot to play.
Hands at front.
Well, exactly. Gulbis just getting the ball back in the court, perhaps hoping for another unforced error. That a screaming winner, though, from Blake.
Two set points. And for a set over 3/4 of an hour without a single break point, it will be a huge concern to James Blake that the first break point of the set is a set point against him. Oh, what a strange set point. Played almost at half pace. Gulbis taking a tumble after his final shot. Right foot just not sliding through the clay there. Could have been awkward, but he's okay. Nice attractive clay court tint to the shirt. And for the second set point in a row, it's a second serve. He's got it. Blake just stumbled a little earlier in the rally, and it allowed Gulbis to take the upper hand. And it's the 19-year-old unseeded Latvian who leads the 7th seed by 2-1.
Set the same.
Well,
That was an unexpected late twist.
it was. Yeah, and Blake at the end of the day was the architect of his own downfall in many respects. There was a wonderful last point though from Gulbis, and this is what he can be all about. There's the little slip you talked about, and then Blake got behind in the rally, but that again a punishing shot, and there's plenty of room for this little drop shot. And well, when you see him play rallies like that and win it so convincingly, you do realise that he certainly can play this game and understand what he's doing out here. But yeah, Blake's forehand just went AWOL in that last game and just coughed up those 3 unforced errors, gave Gulbis the chance to break, and well, what was a fairly undramatic set became a very dramatic one at the end there, and well, we do now certainly have the potential for a huge upset. Yes, the unforced error count seems to be, but I would have liked this guy to have done my matches.
Well, by the reckoning here, James Blake has had 4 unforced errors in the last 2 sets. So that's not bad effort.
And he's losing.
And he's going to have to go. 2 sets to 1 down. He's going to have to go the distance. I mean, that record, until he reversed it at the US Open last year, was one of men's tennis's most incredible stats, wasn't it? The fact that James Blake had played 9 5-set matches and lost them all, and it was really a monkey on his back that he needed to get off sooner rather than later, and amazing that it took 6 years to do it. And since that Santoro victory I mentioned, he's had a couple more against Grosjean in Australia this year, and then against Mathieu in the controversial Davis Cup quarter-final of a few months ago.
It's only French players he can beat over 5 sets.
Famous match he played with Andre Agassi at the US Open in the quarterfinals of 2005. Lost a final set tiebreak, 8 points to 6. What a match that was. What a match.
Yeah, the match against Mathieu as well, and Davis Cup, wasn't it? Mathieu had a couple of match points in that as well. So oh, he's had some pretty exciting ones. One of the strangest ones I think I saw and was did he have a match? Yeah, Max Meany at Wimbledon, wasn't it? 2006. Lost the last couple of sets, 6-1, 6-love.
Max Mirny might be one of the international players hoping to benefit from what one suspects will be a handy little collection of wildcards that the All England Club will distribute to well-known or promising international players this year. And the reason that there might be a few more than usual is because of the substandard nature of British men's tennis at the moment. There just simply aren't the players out there who warrant the awarding of a wildcard. The LTA have put a restriction that you have to be inside the top 250 to get their nomination. But of course the invitation is purely down to the All England Club, and they can decide to go with the nominations or take their own route. But if you do go by the 250, only 2 players are likely to get in at the moment, and one of them is Jamie Baker, who's recovering from serious illness.
Reprise.
Josh Goodall's been on the rise, but still finds himself just outside the cutoff. So the most, Mark Petchey, you would think 3 British players. That's going to be a handy little number to go to internationals, like Mirny, for example.
It would seem that way, wouldn't it? With as you say, if they stick by the criteria, then it's obviously going to be a little difficult to justify the other players getting in. But obviously we'll wait and see. They generally hand out the first tranche on the first Monday of Queens, don't they? Is that correct?
Certainly in the first couple of days of Queens, you normally see it pop into your inbox.
Got my letter in.
And Cecil.
Yes, 5 British men got in last year, but it's not going to be 5 this year, unless the authorities are feeling extraordinarily generous. There's qualifying, isn't there? There's an opportunity to earn your place in the draw. So wildcards into the qualifying competition seem far more appropriate in years like this.
There is no playoff competition, am I correct? There's no playoffs anymore for wildcards.
Front cans. 45.
Well, Blake needs to find his game again here, because Gulbis in the lead on the scoreboard and certainly has the momentum after that swing at the end of the third set.
Gulbis. Premier jeu, quatrième manche.
Gulbis has only faced break points in 3 service games in the match. One of those was the first game, when both players were finding their feet. Second was the game that he was broken in the second set.
Yeah, Blake hasn't done a very good job of actually getting the ball back into play, and once again that's something that he's talked about in the past in terms of his game, that he's somebody who's aggressive, he likes to take the ball early, he likes to dominate what's happening out here. But I have to say that I think in a match like this where Gulbis has served so well and has really not been troubled very often, getting the ball back into play should be a premium for Blake. But that forehand is erratic at best at the moment for the American, and he needs to rediscover his touch on that particular wing. Lovely leap there from Blake, keeping himself in this rally. Gulbis will be slightly disappointed he didn't do more with that particular shot, as Blake steals it away from his opponent.
Frontkens. Fronta. Caron to front. Blake.
I certainly don't feel there's a need to be too pessimistic about Blake's chances still in this match. I feel as though it's there for the taking. He just needs to try and sort of rediscover the form from Rome in many respects, and well, he looks a little more lively there, to be honest, a little more energised. Maybe the long trip that he's had over here, started in Barcelona, is just taking its toll now for the American.
Jan Cecil. Front 0. Caron 0.
His serve really is a potent weapon, and you wonder if it can carry him right to the top of the game, because he dominates proceedings with it, and Blake has rarely been able to sort of get onto one, latch onto a return and turn the tables on his opponent.
Gulbis just wants his towel from the far end of the court. Can't take a tennis player anywhere these days without his towel. It's like a comfort blanket, isn't it?
They're working hard out here. Don't give them too hard a time about it. He's grown into this match, hasn't he, Gulbis? But you know, as I say, in a sort of a word of caution, I don't know whether he's going to be able to sort of put together a string of results. But there's certainly a surface that he is equal with when it comes to James Blake. And again, I think the sort of match that if the Spanish Davis Cup captain Emilio Sanchez is watching, probably feels still fairly comfortable about his team's chances, even though it is being played in Madrid.
And also, when you consider the strength in clay court depth that a nation like Spain has, even if they are missing a couple of their top players, well, I mean, if Ferrer and Nadal aren't there, for example, who do you play? You play Robredo and Ferrero or someone else. You know, probably their fifth team would still be a match in singles for Roddick and Blake on clay.
Almagro, Moya. Badasco.
Ganze 0. Ganze.
Too many tournaments on in Spain, though.
Remember going to the tremendous Davis Cup final between Spain and America a few years ago. Wonderful experience that was in Seville, in the football stadium, down one end. Almost like they set up the court behind one of the goals and erected some temporary stands on the pitch, and it made for a fantastic venue. Up to 25,000 spectators they got in for that at any one time.
Ronta.
Well, another big point there at 15:30. Chance for Gulbis, but that time his backhand letting him down. He's kept a lid on his emotions so far in the match.
Certainly a bit of space out there to his forehand side on the due side. If you swing it out there, he's got one of those sort of movements to his return on his forehand where he moves away on the diagonal, so he's not generally going into the court to hit an aggressive return. Slightly better on his backhand wing, but forehand certainly.
Caronta.
Not as competent as that particular shot. Wonderful winner.
Avantage Blake. Blake.
Disappointing into the game for Gulbis there. Had some chances. Also recognised the fact, I think, in the middle of that game that he needed to really be watertight in terms of the unforced errors he was giving up, but was unable to do so. And the American flag still flying. It's fluttering. It's not exactly flying high at the moment for Blake's chances here in this encounter.
Zero cans.
And that is what Blake can do to you. He can just take matters into his own hands, and one wonders whether this is going to be the game that the American starts finding his returns.
0 trente.
Really well played. Once again, it's courageous using the drop shot here, but he played it to perfection. Blake read it, good speed, but unable to cover this next shot coming up. And again, the first serve
Frontal.
wreaking havoc with Blake's returns.
Caron to trente. Caronta.
A nice recovery to 40-30 there for Gulbis, but unable to finish it off.
Avantage Gulbis. Wait, please. Wait, please. Monsieur. Égalité. Faute. Avantage Blake.
A strangely ambitious second serve from Ernests Gulbis at deuce. Just Blake, a rare chance. Saved by serve volley. Good play.
Égalité.
Yeah, excellent serve as well. I mean, the serve and volley, icing on the cake was the volley, but a wonderful first serve once again on a big point from Gulbis. Although perhaps at times I've bemoaned a sense of consistency in his play, the one thing you have to say is that he has served beautifully throughout this contest.
Jeu, Gulbis. Gulbis mène 3 jeux à 2.
Well, he's never once allowed Blake to really get away from him, has he? He's stuck with him. Even the set he lost, it was a single break. Responded well by winning the third. And even though Blake not at his most comfortable by any stretch of the imagination on clay, he's still the 7th seed, and this would still be a major scalp in the young career of Ernests Gulbis, who has only won 4 matches at Grand Slam level. Lost to Marat Safin in the first round of the Australian Open earlier this year. absolutely thrashed Tommy Robredo in the US Open last year, third round. 6-1, 6-3, 6-2 before going out to Carlos Boyer over 4 sets.
Robredo has a tendency in some of his matches where he's not winning. He's does seem to sort of bow out quite quickly, or dramatically, should we say.
Reprise.
He loves his towel. He really loves his towel. I wonder if he's got a little friend under there at the change of ends. He's always burying his head in the towel. I suppose you'll tell me it's all about focus.
Yann Zizeo. Hands up.
Well, leading 3-2, 15 all. That sort of shot's worth a try because we know he can pull it off.
Well, I happen to think that's a really effective strategy against Blake. I think if you look at the American's game and you think about his weaknesses, I certainly don't feel as though his second serve, particularly on a clay court, is an effective weapon at all. And Gulbis there just snapping it off, but tries to do the same with the first serve, which is in a different category.
Lovely drop shot again from Gulbis. At the moment, you'd certainly list him as the favourite to go on to win this match. If Blake can rediscover forehands like that, there could be a long way to go yet.
Blake.
A very neutral spectator we heard from then, wasn't it? Just a plain, come on! To both of you. So Blake levels at 3 games all. Strange goings on court number 2 here at the moment. One of the adjacent courts where David Nalbandin is playing the 6th seed. Won the first 2 sets against Jeremy Chardy, young player from France. Chardy has won the 3rd set 6-2 and now leads 4-1 in the 4th. Heading for a decider, it seems.
Tursunov also involved in a slightly bizarre result there. A winner over Garcia Lopez, and won the opening set 7-6, won the next 2 sets 6-love, 6-love.
0-30.
Tursunov, who isn't totally enamoured with clay as well, it has to be said, has spoken about his dislike of the surface, feels as though it should be stuck on Mars. Is having a nice little run here.
Gulbis needs to be careful now. Oh, he almost made it. He really almost made it.
And he knew it was coming, and it was lofted up high from Gulbis. It gave Blake the chance.
There was a slight slip from Gulbis at the far end.
And 40. Roland Garros.
Good serve. For a point like that, great point down. Makes another first serve, which he's invariably done on the big points. Have a look at this one. That is Wimbledon-like touch, and that's a good cut-off as well, sensing the down-the-line shot from Blake. And just all in all, you can't do much better than that.
Avantage Gulbis.
And another, a 10th ace for Gulbis.
Gulbis.
Well, two aces, two tremendous volleys, and one
Gulbis
excellent
went
second
4
serve.
sets at 1.
And that has hauled Gulbis out of trouble at 15-40 and edged him ahead 4-3 in this fourth set.
And Blake's frustration level rising with every point that he lost in that last game from 15-40, and you almost feel as though he should probably sacrifice the racket so make himself feel a little bit better, because he is absolutely fuming under there. But as you say, there was not a lot he could do about that. Gulbis coming up with some wonderful tennis, and I know how Blake's feeling though. He's at the 30-40 point when he's gone up the line and Gulbis makes that nice cut-off, as you say, Jonathan. You know, in your own mind you're thinking, I should have gone cross-court. Because you naturally can never give the opponent any credit for reading that play up the line, and I think that's the sort of where his frustration has come from, that he hasn't been able to sort of pick the right shot on some of these you know, big points, to be fair. And even at love 30, when he didn't win the point after Gulbis hit the drop shot, you could just hear him sort of admonish himself and say every game, and he obviously feels as though he's in every game, but he's just unable to make that breakthrough.
Well, the crowd have enjoyed this out on court number one. Bit of a treat for those who don't have a show court ticket. It's quite a good view from the back row there, where you can stand up and have a look at 3 or 4 different courts. But most eyes focused on this one right now.
And a constructive way to take out your frustration. Ripping this forehand.
In what is surely a must-win game for Blake.
Filet, premier service. Hands up.
hopefully for Blake supporters, this isn't a flashback to the game that he played at the end of the third set, where suddenly the forehand started misfiring.
The pace of the shot taking the ball over, but again, a tighter
And
net
the front.
would have sent that back Gulbis' side. And it's just adding to Blake's woes out here.
That was a big forehand, and a safe forehand as well, and that's what you realise that Gulbis possesses. He has the ability to hurt top-class
That's
players, but he
correct.
doesn't need to take it to the line all the time.
Front count.
Not the fastest serve Blake has dispatched all match. Took the pace off it, went for placement out wide. It worked for him. Second break point. Oh, and he's messed it up. And he's handed the break to Ernests Gulbis, who now will serve for the match. And what a time to play one of your worst shots of the 2.5-hour contest.
Well, he deserved the break in many ways, but Blake in the big occasion today, in the big points, just simply hasn't played as well as he's needed to.
Kansas Hill. Toronto.
Well, Blake at the moment looks like he's scratching around for his grass court kit. That's where he's heading in a minute. Gulbis has played superbly at the times when it has really mattered in this match. He's kept his head as well impressively for an inexperienced 19-year-old, and has followed the break with an exemplary service game here, and his match point. Lovely shot to win it, and he deserves it. He fully deserves it. Last year it was Hedman. This year it's the 7th seed James Blake, and for the first time in the afternoon, a smile from the 19-year-old. And it's a very impressive way to move into the last 32 of the French Open.
very impressive last game as well, I have to say. No nerves, it seemed, whatsoever, finding his first serve when he needed it. Blake was, to be fair, just a little disappointing. Couldn't find his best tennis at the right occasions today, which is surprising of someone, his ability and his experience against somebody like Gulbis. Didn't really allow Gulbis at times to beat himself. But at the same time, as you say, a wonderful victory for the 19-year-old, and you wonder whether that will propel him up towards the world's top 20 in terms of the experience that he's gained in this match and how he can beat top players.
The big points were played exceptionally well. The serve was strong, caused relentless damage. The ground strokes, well, they can be really effective on both wings, and that's one of the biggest wins of his life. And he takes his place in the third round, the man from the tennis hotbed of Riga in Latvia. But this global sport throws up new superstars from the most unlikely corners, and then this Gulbis moves onwards. Well, the next match we're going to be picking up for you here on BBCI is already underway. The match featuring Amelie Mauresmo on the centre court, Philippe Chatrier. So we'll have a quick break just for a few minutes, and then when we return we'll pick up the Mauresmo match. She's a set down, incidentally, so we'll see whether she has it in her to stay in her home Grand Slam.